Good morning. First of all, I have to apologize a little bit because obviously you're late. You're running late because of me. I didn't actually say any word yet, but I felt sick this morning. Tried to recover. I recovered, but people were searching for me. And that's why you somehow had to wait another 15 minutes. I'm really sorry for that. I'm now in between now and your lunch. So let's see what we will make out of this. My topic, fitness for purpose, the Kanban way for focused agility. And I'm obviously right into this discussion. I just heard a little bit about methods, the methods war, and I won't probably get into this, but there are three important words up there, fitness, purpose, and agility. And I think it's always interesting to know what agility is. And I don't think it has to be attached only to the Agile Manifesto. So what is agility for you? I mean, one question, who is currently in an agile transition with his company or her company? 1, 2, 3 guys in the room who already managed to survive an agile transition. Okay, so not too much going on. Okay, so you're probably still on the smaller scale, working with teams and not the whole large organization. That's a very interesting topic, though. We just heard about a couple of frameworks which are emerging in this area, like SAFe and LESS and whatever they are. And they all deal with this, where we say, well, agility obviously nowadays means more than just IT teams and single teams, but it has to cover the whole business, the whole product life cycle. The only challenge here is actually that lots of what we do with this is we use prescribed templates, so templates we can get out of the desk and try to install it, by good advice, of course. But that's a little bit challenging because I think that's a little bit contradictory to agility, isn't it? Because agility is about emergence, agility is about learning, about dealing with uncertainty. So there's one thing which you probably know. If we go into such transitions, if we deal with change, we always have this situation where there is some target state where we want to be, and there is a current state where we think we are. First thing, it's quite interesting to know actually where we are. It's not so easy in a large organization. There are lots of different stakeholders who might have totally different views into where we are currently and maybe even where we want to go. And now the whole mess starts. That's the way transitions would love to look like. I mean, program behind a kind of project, organized, a board, project organization, and here we go. Of course, inspect and adapt, but there is a kind of work package structure which we want to run through. That's the other side of the medal. That's the human being. People don't really work easily this way. Just taking a target situation, saying, that's interesting, that's our tomorrow's state, that's how we will work, that's how my job environment will look like, very often puts us into a kind of shock phase first. So as soon as we understood something is going on and things are going to change in my environment, I'm running into a little bit of a, let's say, shock situation. There are a couple of models out there which are exactly going this way. There is a kind of depression. People are really getting, frightened, afraid. They might start resisting what's going out there, obviously or not. And then whatever happens, they land, there's one method which calls it the Valley of Tears. So this is the valley where some people never get out of. Some people maybe even drop off because they might leave the company saying, this is not my business anymore. Or maybe make it the other day up there. Usually managers are faster up there because those are the guys who actually created the vision, the plan, so they already know where to go. Now this is the big challenge with these transitions, because we call this, by the way, J-curve in a simplified way. because if we want to be successful in a future target state, we obviously have to bring all people through this valley of tears to get up here. And there is another challenge. We still don't know, after a couple of months, or call it maybe years, if this was the useful state to be. So far about change management and agility in transitions. I got a question. That's a little bit unfortunately now broken the joke. Can you read this, please? Yeah, and that's what it's supposed to mean. Unfortunately, there is another font on this machine, so it doesn't work. This is a very nice experiment, and what's the experiment about, actually? Our brain is filling gaps. Whenever you see a couple of strokes on a flip chart, for example, you will immediately fill it to see a circle. You see a couple of, part of letters, you fill it and will read it and match it with your patterns. That's how brain is adopted to work. And it's very useful. We don't have to rethink what we do all the time, because that would be very energy consuming. We already use existing patterns. The only problem is when we think about the future, or when we talk about the future, this is a little bit of a, let's say, hurdle. Because what we have here, and Mike Rother actually is the guy who is responsible for this. He wrote this book, Toyota Kata, which he didn't want to name it Toyota Kata. I think his original title was Beyond What You Can See. But the publisher didn't think this was too sexy, so they just put Toyota in there. And Kata is a second word. It is basically based upon how Toyota actually works in terms of mental models, how they think, how they deal on a management level with their teams. And the model Mike Rother actually draws up is here to say, well, we live in this area where we work and deal with patterns, the patterns we learned from the past. This is something he calls the predictable zone. Now the problem is, if we look into the future, for example, like an agile transition or some target state where we want to be, then the problem is we don't know anything about this, actually. The only problem is we have lots of assumptions. So what he calls here the current knowledge threshold is very often preoccupied with what people already assume has to be done. So taking a model from the shelf, like Scrum, for example, whether it's a process, whether are roles, is very easy. We know it should be the solution. There can be any other solution people look at. But the problem here is actually, how can we get back to a kind of, well, we don't know the future. It's uncertain, and uncertainty actually means options. It's a good thing, but we don't like it. Basically, we don't like it because that makes us a little bit afraid. So with this model actually stepping back, Mike Rother says, well, let's draw up a kind of target vision, but it doesn't say that we will ever be there. It can be that this target vision will change. And of course, we don't know anything about the way towards this. So what can we do? Well, we can approach it with very, very small little steps. So having a target condition where you want to be with your business, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 2 years, can be basically approached by a kind of learning path towards a target. And in each step, you will take action for the next step. So walking through this via, for example, like here, plan, do, act, check, act cycles, just gives you a systematic, and in this case, even scientific approach to overcome your challenge, with only building up your existing patterns, questioning your patterns, setting up hypotheses, and working towards this hypothesis. Finally, running experiments. That's what we do here. And then what you have to do is learning from experiments, learning what the next useful step would be if you step aside or if you go ahead. The problem we have in many, many situations where we work, and especially also with agility, is that, well, it's very hard to deal just with experiments because our managers, our teams, even our team members, they want to know what's going to happen next. Scrum, for example, and don't get me wrong, I'm also running Scrum consulting projects. I'm helping clients with Scrum. I'm teaching Scrum. But I'm not so much, focused on single methods. And the question is how to apply it. Scrum comes with roles. Scrum comes with a process. That's first of all very comfortable. But in many situations, we just install it in a way, well, without considering the mindset behind. What happens then is very clear. We start doing it without actually knowing why, without the assumption, why should we actually change? Our mindset targets in a totally different direction. We still stick to our former job titles as a project manager, business analyst, whatever it is, tester, I heard. And somehow whoever brought us into this concept, we don't find ourselves represented there. Problem, well, actually, it doesn't fit into our culture. Culture, on the other hand, is everything in any organization. So if we want to transition, if we want to move people, large groups of people, we have to consider their culture. And that's very essential because culture cannot be changed. It cannot directly be manipulated. It can only be influenced. Thinking about to install something or start something like continuous learning, this approach I just showed you before, can start driving a kind of experimentation culture, a learning culture over time. And this is very important to consider. Now, agility, once again, what is it? Well, obviously there is still business. It's not only about software, it's really about the whole business, and business usually is about two things. It's about what our customers, hopefully we have customers, what our customers need, and on the other hand side, what we can deliver. So there is a kind of equation which has to be brought or balanced, not brought into balance, because if we would have balance here all the time, we wouldn't have any risk, obviously. So there is always kind of risk, this is in imbalance. And what we have to still think about to bring this into a kind of equation where our capabilities fit what our customers need. So we have to look into their risk, into what actually drives their success with our services, with our products, and think about how we can introduce this in our daily business, in our methods. And that's where I want to introduce you a little bit to Kanban. Who is actually using Kanban? Who is already using Kanban back home? Okay, not too many again. Who is familiar with the Kanban concept? Okay, quite a lot. Okay, so there could be an interpretation out of this. Now, Kanban is exactly this way where we try to avoid coming up with a methodology. Forgive me this word, because the method behind is sometimes referred to Kanban method. But we don't want to oppose a kind of process model. We don't want to oppose role models. We want to start understanding what the business needs. And we want to start considering how we can evolve from there. That's a big difference from just transitioning to somewhere. And, well, what's the idea behind Kanban? I like this very much. It's the Kanban Agendas. Why Kanban? This is elaboration from the Kanban community. Lots of people collaborated on this and considered, yeah, why? Why do we do this? The first one we probably know. The line level, that's the team level where the people work, where we develop software. That's where we sometimes think about relief from overburdening. We want to get into the situation to have more focus on what we are doing, to do things right, or maybe righter, to have more time, not to constantly switch tasks, projects, and feature work. So that's a very obvious one. Then on the middle layer, there is another one. Yes, we still think about managers. It's not a very common term in a couple of agile frameworks. We rather think about management. But there are still also managers who take care for management. And if we look at the mid-level, we have this service-oriented agenda. We want to think about what we do in the organization like services. We provide services to the outside, to other teams, to other departments. maybe even a manager provides a service within the organization. And what we want to achieve is that these services can be somehow, let's say, coordinated, decided upon, decisions made, let's say, based upon confidence. What does it need for this? Well, obviously, we need to have understanding about the system we work in. And on the uppermost level, on the upmost level, we have the senior management, executives. That's what we call survivability agenda for the business. That's where we really want to think about where to drive our business into which direction, where to pursue which strategy, and to think about how can we actually deliver and keep our promises, whether it's about time, whether it's about quality, whether it's about the need in general. Now, Kanban, like many other methods actually, derive lots of its sources, of its roots from sources like systems thinking, and respectively, in this case, from Peter Senge, who wrote a book, The Fifth Discipline, in the last decade, or actually the last 15 years, it's already ago. And it's quite interesting to me, I like this book very much, that nowadays it seems to be very, very popular, very, very accurate, very, let's say, helpful, and actually describes lots of these things we're actually doing. The first thing, systems thinking, actually the idea of, well, the whole is not just the sum of its parts. A very easy trap in larger organizations, in any kind of business. Just to say, well, if I want to organize my business, I can optimize on each team level, and then just the whole thing will end up in a great performance of the whole organization. No, the thing is, you really have to mind sub-optimization. As soon as you go into optimizing a single team performance, a single product, you will probably sub-optimize the whole system, which is your organization. Because there will always be kind of side effects you couldn't actually take into consideration before. That's all about systems of thinking. There is no clear causality anymore. There is no cause and effect, and you just say, well, if I turn these knobs, there will be this result. So this is a very challenging kind of thinking, especially for engineers. If you're educated in traditional engineering, you're usually used to cause and effect mechanisms. The next thing the learning organization draws upon is mastery. To pursue actually a kind of maybe nirvana of getting better and better and better in what we're doing, in what the individual is doing, but also in what the collaborative team or the organization is doing. Another one, mental models. This is exactly what we just had before with the patterns. Being aware of what we see, what we think we understand might be just a projection out of our own past. So we carry our mental models with us, and everyone in the organization, in the team does. The challenge is putting all on the table and being aware of them. That's the big challenge, and is very important. If we don't do this, we discuss, we try to think about a future where we have totally different mindsets behind, where we have totally different pictures in our head, even using the same words. Thinking about Agile, what do you think about? Probably everybody in the room has different experiences, different ideas, and different desires. And finally, coming to a shared vision. Based upon this, understanding where we actually want to go, what our target conditions shall be, we want to pursue. And finally, being, let's say, capable of collaboratively, together, learn and evolve. And this, again, draws upon experiments. We need to use experiments in our business, in our daily business, to become aware of what is actually possible, how to drive uncertainty. So, the term fitness, and that's a very interesting one, because fitness is usually, something we know from sports, but it's also a term from evolutionary theory, where obviously we talk about why did certain features or species survive and others didn't. Obviously, evolution is about uncertainty. We can't know what happens tomorrow. Maybe we are the dinosaurs, and the big rock will hit the earth and we will not be here anymore. Anyway, nowadays we're still, doing what we're doing, and in order to grow fitness for survival as an organization, a couple of things are important. And the first thing is understanding. What I just said before, we sometimes don't understand where we currently are. So here I especially want to outline again, what is actually the capability we run? What is the customer? Who is the customer? What is the risk of the customer? What do they try to achieve? Why do we deliver certain features for the customer? And when we delivered it, does it work? Does it help? Or is it just delivered? Is it just released? Putting this into a balance, thinking about our current performance. So where are we at the moment? Are we doing well? Are we doing good in comparison to our competitors? Fitness is pretty much related to what the market demands, what the customer demands, and what the others are doing. You don't have to be fitter generally than everybody else in order to waste your energy. Fitness doesn't mean you have to run a marathon. You don't have to be able to run a marathon if your business is running 60 meters competitions. Or if you're just, running with friends in the woods. You don't have to be a superstar in this case. So you really have to understand what is the business you work in. Again, driving experiments are obviously the first baseline to start actually learning and grow your fitness. This is like the everyday training to understand how you can get further and what you need and where you can improve. Now, looking into Kanban again, you said you know it. These are the practices. I usually don't like to start with practices. It's usually better to start with principles. But I think lots of what I said already addresses lots of the principles. So what do we do in Kanban to start the baseline for understanding, to start a baseline to start evolutionary change? Well, it's basically three things first. Visualizing what we do, limiting what we do, and managing the flow through our system. That's the three most important things. Visualizing is a very important thing in nearly every Agile method nowadays. Scrum does it with its boards. Every Agile team has somewhere board stickies and puts its work, what they do, somewhere to a wall or a board. This is very important because there you can actually get out of your mental models. You can actually start getting to understand each other. Very easy one. And the nice thing, as soon as we do it, we start already changing a little bit. We cannot, prohibit it because as soon as we visualize what we do, we will see, forgive me the word, bottlenecks. We will see issues. We will see something where we think, well, we should do something about it. Maybe the whole wall is crowded with work, and we will see, well, managing flow obviously will become hard. So what we're going to do, which will be the work we focus on. So the next step will be obviously, okay, if we want to deliver work to our customers, which we pretend to understand, and where we want to deliver on promise, then obviously we have to, address our capability selectively. We have to limit what we do and shouldn't do everything in parallel. So where will we set our limits? That's the first question. So we obviously need to consider, okay, who's first? Priority 1 or 2? That's not a very helpful definition. So we should get together with our customers and think about, why do you need something specifically? Do you all say you have a priority 1 because otherwise you don't trust to get anything at any time? Or do you just don't trust us in general? Managing flow is then really thinking about, okay, how fast can we learn? It's not just getting out something to the customer, but how fast can we finish what we currently do and get feedback and learn if it was useful or not. So closing this loop as fast as possible. And then there are a couple of further practices where I say they are more or less accompanying what we try to achieve here. explicit things, putting what we consider as working agreements explicitly out there to the wall or whatever, is a baseline for getting out of our mental models, to know what we understand about our business, how we want to do it, how we want to achieve it. Feedback loops, as I just said, okay, we work in this system, so obviously we need feedback loops. In Scrum it's called dailies, it's called retrospectives and reviews. In Kanban we also have feedback loops. Generally, collaboratively working on something needs obviously feedback loops. And then the question about, okay, improvement. So not just having feedback loops, but what we see, what does it trigger? What do we agree upon to do next? And here we want to use some kind of scientific method. What I just showed you before, the Kanban or Toyota Kata by Mike Rother, is just one of them. Feedback loops. What we do in Kanban happens on 3 levels. We also want to engage something on a daily basis. Call it stand-up meeting, daily meeting, whatever you like. Something where a team gets together and looks at their work, focused, considers, how do we get our work further? How does the flow currently look like? Do we have blockers? What can we do about it? That's the first level. It's a little bit different in Kanban, in the Kanban world as we know it, than in the Scrum world. We don't look at these 3 questions. We really look at the flow. We really look at the customers whom we address next with the next deliverable and how we get it out of the door. We have really this look from right to left where we want to get things out. The next thing, more on the service delivery in general. Maybe on a weekly basis, leaders, the team, coaches, managers get together and look into real data. And that's another interesting point. We work with a system which we want to understand how it works. So we want to use data, how it performed in the past. And here you see a couple of graphs, how certain work passed through the system. And we use certain techniques to distinguish between certain types of work in order not to get confused. And after a while we found out, wow, certain types of work which runs through our system, through our team, whatever we look at, has a kind of predictability. There are some mechanisms which help to keep it in a predictable way and say we can make assumptions about the future. This doesn't mean that nothing can happen, but we have the idea that, for example, in 95% of all cases, we will deliver a certain service in a given time. So if we look at this data, does it meet our fitness criteria? Does it meet the fitness criteria opposed by the markets, by the customers? Do we need to change something? What is it? So that's on the team level, and taking this one level up to the management, to the executive level, to the level where certain departments inside an organization coordinate, we call the operations review. Another feedback loop which happens not so frequently, hopefully monthly, and where we, again, put all the data from all the different teams together on the table and think, how does the collaboration between them work? Are there any blockers in between them? Can they collaborate? Are there needed service level adjustments? Is there a need for new service level agreements? So this happens on this level. So there are lots of feedback loops where we look into the system and consider what to do next. Now, what we just described, again, is not a planned mechanism. Yes, there is data from the past. We just use it to learn and to make assumptions about the future. But what happens actually is we're open for changes all the time through. If we look at the current situation, our initial process, how it works today in a team or in a department, we can consider, is it fit for its purpose? And if it is, we can actually make the next step. We can actually evolve the process. We can consider what should be the next experiment based upon the level we just achieved. And we will continue this. As I showed you before with the picture of the target vision, there is no defined end state. There is no target state where we want to be. We started where we are, where we came from, with our initial processes in every department, in any team where we want to go with. And we just considered, how are we doing today in terms of our fitness? Is there a gap? Does it fit? How can we get better? And we do that constantly on and on. And in case something happens, in case our performance degraded, we can still change back. We didn't make a big, let's say, change which made it really hard to get back. We didn't change roles. We didn't change really the whole process. We just adapted something. And that's the way we can go through the whole time, all the time. There is all the time potential for improvement. And what we have here is a process which is not prescribed, which is not predetermined. It's a process which is emergent. So how do we apply this inside the organization? Well, again, there is no big transition path. There is the idea that what we do now is basically right. We just have the idea to evolve, to improve. So let's look into different areas where we want to start with. Maybe in any of the teams or any of the departments. And let's consider on each individual level all what I just showed you before, what we have to learn about the system. Let each of the teams explore what their demand is and what their capability is to deliver, based upon observed data. That's what they do today. And then from this, let's think about step by step how they interconnect to each other. So for example, one output, one capability provided by one team can be the input for another team, for another department. Could be a software development team here delivering to a data center team, to a data operations team. It could be several IT software development teams developing to a larger rollout, build team, whatever it is. There could be dependencies within the process to another team, maybe to some experts in the database department. So we don't prescribe an optimum process before. We just let it evolve based upon where it is. And this happens through the way of the feedback loops, day by day by day by day, all the time through. So you might see the difference here. There is no path A, path B, and you go just from A to B. There is really just the state where we currently are, the idea that we want to emerge our processes, to become fitter, to understand where we have to be or where we should be, and then the idea to start doing it. This requires, of course, leadership. So who is going to start this, you might ask? Well, it's the question. Leadership is something a little bit different maybe from management, as you know, and you need leaders who take action here, and hopefully you will find time after time people within the teams who take over leadership themselves by doing what they're doing, by starting their improvement journey and starting to infect others with this leadership path. So I'm coming to a kind of conclusion. First of all, what you should mind is probably the idea of installing prescribed templates in a given environment. Again, something like Scrum is already a template. It's a minimum viable template, you could call it. But if you go out for a larger, let's say, scope in an organization, you will probably have the challenge that you will pretty fast fall into the trap of let's say, resistance. People might not really understand what you want from them. They would maybe resist because they fear. And you should probably consider if there are alternatives. An evolutionary path doesn't come with a prescribed template. It comes rather with understanding. It comes with the idea of thinking about what are our common values and what are the principles we want to work with. And then you might use some practices which are helpful. Using a practice for visualization, you don't have to use with Kanban. It doesn't really involve Kanban. But limiting work which you're doing can be also very helpful. Values, principles, growing a shared vision. That's what I already mentioned. So you want to have the organization focused on what they do, for whom they do it, and why they do it. And this is not easy. This is not a very easy thing. If you look into any team, any software team, and ask them, why are you doing this? Whom do you help with what you're doing? They might just say, well, I'm doing this for my Scrum Master, or I'm doing this for my manager, or for my project manager, or for this customer, but I don't know what they do with it. Or I deliver it to the IT department. So it's not that, let's say, common that people really understand why they are doing things. Growing a shared vision really means getting into this direction. Understanding your business means, first of all, where are we today? How do we perform? What is all the work we do? And how are we doing with it? What is our lead times? How is our quality? How can we fulfill our promises? That's a big first step in every team. And then understand, how far are we away from what our businesses actually need? So this is the next thing. And the final one, to consider leadership being the driving engine to get this whole process further. And finally, to never stop improving. So improvement doesn't mean it's a process again from A to B. Improvement really means you can do this relentlessly all the time without any interruption. There will always be somebody else otherwise on the market who will improve faster. So whenever you say, okay, we stopped, we think we are perfect, we are fit enough for our purpose, then there will be always somebody else who will take over. Okay, so what's the time? Hope I'm somehow in time. Anybody has a watch? 10 after. So this means, is there any question? We have 5 minutes, I think, left. Is there any question? No question? Okay, so if we meet afterwards, feel free to start a conversation. Otherwise, I want to wish you a good lunch time. I'm not sure how long the break will be. I think it was planned for 90 minutes, so... We have an hour and 50 minutes. Okay, so enjoy your lunch. See you later. Thank you.